The children's laughter you hear near the waterfall isn't an echo of the past. Welcome to the Wilderness Protocol. We are taught to trust our senses, but the wilderness is a place of profound sensory deception. The wind can sound like a whisper. The rustle of leaves can sound like footsteps. And sometimes the roar of a waterfall can carry other sounds within it, sounds that are so out of place, so wrong, that your mind tries to dismiss them as tricks of the air. My name is Samuel Keogh. I spent 8 years as a backcountry trail maintenance supervisor in the Cascade Mountains. My job was to walk the forgotten paths, to clear fallen trees, and to repair the bridges that span the deep, cold rivers. It was a lonely job, but a good one. It was a job I understood. Until I was assigned to the trail leading to Whispering Falls. It was there I learned that some sounds are not echoes. They are invitations. And you should never ever accept. The work order came down on a Monday morning, slid onto my desk with the pile of other routine maintenance requests. It was simple, innocuous. Designation: Trail 734, Whispering Falls. Task: Structural survey of the Gorge Bridge for potential reconstruction. Duration: 2-day backcountry assignment. It looked like any other job, but I should have known from the designation. In the Cascade Range, any trail numbered in the 700s was an old one, a forgotten one, a place with a history. My supervisor, a man named Henderson who viewed the forest through the lens of liability insurance and budget reports, was typically blunt. "Keogh, the feds have kicked down some money for backcountry infrastructure," he'd said, not looking up from his computer. "They want to know what it would take to reopen the Whispering Falls Trail. The official reason it was closed is geological instability around the gorge. The bridge has been out for at least 15 years. And the unofficial reason?" I asked, already knowing there was one. Henderson finally looked up, his face impassive. "The unofficial reason is that people have a habit of not coming back from it. No bodies, no signs of animal attacks. They just check out. It's got a high evaporation rate. Let's call it. The old-timers call it the lullaby path. Superstitious nonsense, of course. But it's bad for the park's image. Your job is just to assess the bridge. Don't be a hero. Don't be a statistic. In and out. Understood?" I understood. I was a pragmatist like Henderson. I believed in the tangible dangers. Rotten wood, unstable rocks, sudden weather. I did not believe in lullabies. I set out the next morning. The air was cool and heavy with the smell of an approaching rain. A deep earthy scent of pine needles and damp soil. The trailhead for 734 was barely recognizable, marked only by a single, weather-beaten wooden post from which a trail closed sign had long ago rotted away. The first few miles were a struggle against nature's reclamation. Fallen logs, thickets of thorny salmonberry bushes, and a trail that was more of a memory than a path. The forest here was different. Older. The trees were Titans, ancient Douglas firs and western red cedars that created a dense, interlocking canopy far above. It was a cathedral of wood, and the light that filtered down was a dim, green, subaquatic gloom. The silence was profound. Not an empty silence, but a full one. It felt like the forest was holding its breath, listening to the clumsy intrusion of my footsteps. It was around noon when I first heard the falls. It wasn't a roar, not from this distance. It was a constant, low-frequency hum that I felt in the soles of my boots before I consciously heard it. A soft, pervasive shushing sound that seemed to be the baseline of this entire valley. Whispering Falls. And then woven into the fabric of that white noise, I heard the other sound. First, I thought it was a bird. A strange melodic warbler I didn't recognize. But the sound repeated, and it wasn't a bird call. It was a peal of laughter. High, clear, and unmistakably human. A child. My rational mind immediately took over. It's another hiker. A family, perhaps, who had found another way in, ignoring the closure signs. They were probably up ahead, closer to the falls. It was reckless but plausible. I dismissed it and pressed on. But the laughter didn't fade, and it didn't get closer. It remained a constant, ethereal counterpoint to the growing roar of the waterfall. It was as if it was tethered to the sound of the water itself. Sometimes it was a single, joyful giggle like a secret being told. Other times it was a chorus of several children, their shrieks of delight echoing in a way that defied the dense, sound-absorbing nature of the forest. The sound was pure, undiluted happiness. It was the sound of a perfect, sun-drenched day at a playground. And it had no place here in this deep, dark, forgotten valley. I tried to rationalize it. Acoustic illusion. The unique topography of the canyon, the specific way the water crashed against the rocks, must be creating a complex harmonic that the human brain interprets as laughter. It was a scientific-sounding explanation, a shield against the creeping, irrational dread that was beginning to form in the pit of my stomach. The laughter was a lure. It was beautiful and it was wrong and it was pulling me forward. I reached the gorge late in the afternoon. The sight was breathtaking. A massive chasm, a deep wound in the earth's skin, with the river churning 100 feet below. And spanning it, or what was left of it, was the bridge. It was a skeleton. The thick wooden planks were gray and splintered, many of them missing entirely, revealing the terrifying drop below. The support cables, once thick as a man's arm, were now just frayed, rusted threads sagging uselessly. Henderson had been right about one thing. The bridge was a death trap. My survey was complete before I even took out my tools. I decided to make camp about 50 yards back from the gorge's edge, in a small defensible clearing surrounded by large boulders. As I set up my tent and started a small fire, the falls were a constant, thunderous presence. And the laughter was still there, rising and falling with the gusts of mist. As dusk settled, a new, unsettling detail emerged. The laughter began to form patterns. It sounded like they were playing games. I could distinguish the sounds of a chasing game, bursts of shrieks followed by peals of glee. I could hear what sounded like a sing-song rhyme, the kind used to decide who is it. The words were lost in the roar of the water, but the cadence, the rhythm, was unmistakable. I sat there, stirring my instant noodles, and tried to record my professional observations in my notebook. Gorge width, approximate 110 feet. Existing abutments appear structurally unsound. Full replacement required. But my hand kept pausing. I wanted to write, auditory phenomenon noted. Sounds consistent with multiple children at play. Source, unknown. Feeling of being watched, constant. I didn't. I was a pragmatist. A man of science. That night, sleep was a long time coming. I lay in my tent, the roar of the falls a constant, vibrating pressure against the thin nylon walls. The laughter had finally stopped, and its absence was impossibly more terrifying than its presence. The silence it left behind was not empty. It was expectant. It was waiting. My dream was vivid and strange. I was not in the forest, but in an old black and white photograph. I was standing in front of a small, rustic-looking schoolhouse. In front of the schoolhouse, a group of children were posing for a class picture. There were 4 of them, 2 boys in overalls, 2 girls in simple homespun dresses. Their faces were serious, unsmiling, as children often were in old photographs. The teacher, a stern-looking woman, stood behind them. Behind the schoolhouse, I could see the unmistakable shape of Whispering Falls. As I looked at the photo, the children's faces slowly began to change. Their serious expressions melted away, replaced by wide, joyful, silent smiles. Then they began to wave at me. Not a friendly wave. A beckoning wave. Come join the picture. Come be still with us. I woke with a jolt, my heart pounding. The inside of the tent was cold and damp. It was still hours before dawn. I did not go back to sleep. The morning was gray and oppressive. A thick mist had rolled in, shrouding the forest and muffling the roar of the falls. My task for the day was simple: take the final, precise measurements of the gorge and the bridge supports for my report. I packed up my camp, the feeling of dread from the night now a cold, hard knot in my stomach. As I approached the edge of the gorge, I noticed a small, almost hidden path leading down the cliff face. It wasn't on the map. It was steep and slick with moss. My training told me to ignore it. My duty told me I needed to assess the stability of the rock at the base of the bridge abutments. It was a good excuse. The truth was I was being pulled. I needed to confront the source of the laughter. I needed to prove to myself that there was a rational explanation. The descent was treacherous. The roar of the falls grew with every step, until it was a physical, vibrating force that shook my very bones. The air was thick with a cold, clean spray that soaked my jacket. I finally reached the bottom, a world of black, wet rock and churning white water. Down here, at the heart of the noise, the laughter was gone. There was only the thunder of the water. Relief, sharp and sudden, washed over me. I laughed out loud, a single shaky bark of a laugh. See? An acoustic illusion. A trick of the canyon. I took out my camera, a tool of logic and reason, and began taking photos for my report. I was documenting the erosion patterns on the far side of the riverbank, near the base of the falls, when my lens found it. It was an alcove, a small sheltered space behind the curtain of water and mist. And inside the alcove there was evidence of human presence. There were small, carefully stacked piles of smooth gray river stones, children's cairns. And on the dark, wet wall of the alcove, etched with a sharp white stone, were drawings. They were the simple, powerful, and heartbreakingly clear drawings of a child. There was a sun with a smiling face, a lopsided house with a chimney puffing out smoke, a row of stick figures holding hands, a dog with a curly tail. And on the ground, tucked into a dry crevice, were the toys. A single worn-out tennis ball, a small tin car, its wheels rusted solid, a doll with one button eye and hair made of yellow yarn, and a child's hiking boot, small and brown, its laces still tied in a neat double knot. I lowered my camera. My breath caught in my throat. This was not a place of illusion. It was a place of memory, a shrine. The spook tales from the old-timers weren't stories. They were warnings. A tragedy had happened here. Or perhaps many tragedies over many years. The lost hikers. The vanished children. They had all been drawn here, to the lullaby of the falls. A deep, profound sadness settled over me. I felt like a trespasser, a clumsy intruder in a place of immense grief. I had my explanation. The laughter was an echo, a psychic residue left behind by an event of such emotional power that it had permanently stained the landscape. It was a ghost story, yes, but a sad one. I turned to leave, to make the difficult climb back to the world of logic and reason. As I did, my foot slipped on a slick, moss-covered rock. I threw my hand out to steady myself against the canyon wall. My palm landed squarely on one of the chalk drawings. The drawing of the smiling stick figure family. I quickly pulled my hand back. A dark, wet smudge now marred the picture. The smiling father figure was smeared, half erased. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the empty air. A cold so intense it felt like a burn washed over me. It did not come from the mist. It came from inside the rock, from the earth itself. And the sound of the waterfall changed. The constant, thunderous roar deepened, and a new note emerged from within it. A low, guttural, angry growl. And then I heard the laughter again. It was not faint and distant. It was not an echo. It was loud, sharp, and clear. And it was right behind me. I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest. The alcove was empty. The gorge was empty. But the laughter was everywhere. It was a chorus of childish glee that was no longer joyful. It was manic. It was cruel. It was the sound of a game that had been disturbed. And a new voice, a little girl's, whispered directly in my ear. A clear, cold, and terrible statement. "You broke the family." The laughter was no longer a phantom. It was a physical presence. It swirled around me in the misty air at the bottom of the gorge, a dizzying, disorienting vortex of sound. The childish glee had curdled into something sharp and malicious. It was the sound of bullies on a playground who had just found a new victim. "You broke the family," the little girl's voice whispered again, this time layered with the voices of the others, a discordant chorus of accusation. "Now you have to draw him back. You have to make us whole again." My mind, reeling with a terror so profound it bordered on paralysis, seized on that single strange command. Draw him back. It was an instruction, a task, and in a situation with no logic, a clear if insane instruction felt like a lifeline. I can't, I stammered, my voice swallowed by the roar of the falls. I don't have anything to draw with. A new wave of laughter, sharp and mocking, answered me. Yes, you do, a boy's voice chirped, seeming to come from the rock face to my left. I turned. Lying on a flat, dry patch of stone, a spot that I swear had been empty seconds before, was a single piece of chalky white rock. It was smooth, shaped almost like a thick piece of charcoal, and it glowed with a faint, pale luminescence in the gloom of the gorge. It was an offering, a tool for my penance. You must draw him on a listening tree, the girl's voice instructed, now seeming to come from high above me. And he must be smiling. Daddy is always smiling in the pictures. A listening tree? I asked, my voice trembling as I reached down and picked up the chalk. It was cold, impossibly so, and felt strangely heavy, dense with a purpose I didn't understand. The ones with the peeling skin, the boy's voice explained. The ones that watch. You'll know it when you see it. Now hurry. The game is about to begin. Game. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a task. It was something else. I didn't have time to question it. I scrambled back up the treacherous path, away from the deafening roar of the falls, the laughter chasing me like a pack of invisible hounds. When I reached the top of the gorge, the forest was different. The oppressive silence had returned, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was the quiet of a held breath, the silence of a playing field before the whistle blows. The air was thick with anticipation. I looked around for a listening tree. I didn't have to look far. In a small clearing just off the trail stood a massive paper birch tree. Its bark was peeling off in wide, parchment-like strips resembling sunburnt skin. But what made me stop, my heart hammering against my ribs, were the knots in its trunk. There were dozens of them, and they weren't the normal, random burls you see on old trees. They were shaped, unmistakably, like human ears. Large, small, some perfectly formed, some twisted and distorted. The entire trunk was a grotesque tapestry of wooden ears, all seemingly cocked and listening to the silent forest. This was the place. With the cold, heavy piece of chalk in my trembling hand, I approached the tree. I began to draw on a smooth patch of bark between two of the larger ears. I am not an artist. My hand shook, creating a clumsy, childish stick figure. A circle for a head, a line for a body. Give him his arms and legs, the chorus of voices whispered, seeming to emanate from the tree itself. I drew 4 more lines. And his eyes, they prompted. I drew 2 dots. Now the smile, the girl's voice commanded, a new urgency in her tone. It has to be a happy smile. You have to believe it's happy. I tried to channel the memory of the drawing I had smudged, the simple, joyful arc. I pressed the chalk to the bark and drew a wide, curving smile. As I completed the arc, the chalk crumbled to dust in my hand. My task was done. I had remade the family. I had made it right. I stood there, panting, my back to the tree. Is it done? I asked the silent woods. Can I go now? A long, agonizing silence followed. I could feel the forest watching me, the tree listening behind me. I could feel a judgment being passed. Then a single, cold, sharp giggle echoed from the branches above me. It was the girl's voice, and it was full of a terrifying, triumphant cruelty. Silly man, she said. That wasn't the price. That was just buying your way into the game. The boy's voice joined hers, flat and cold. Now we play hide and seek. What? I spun around, staring at the empty woods. We hide. You seek, the voices said in a chilling, sing-song unison. There are 4 of us. You have until the last light leaves the sky to find us. Find all 4 and you win. The path out of the forest will be made clear to you. And if I don't? I whispered, a knot of ice forming in my stomach. The laughter returned, a chorus of it now, echoing from every direction. It was the only answer I got. The game begins now, the girl's voice said, fading as if carried away on a non-existent wind. 1, 2, 3. I was alone again. But not truly alone. I was now a player in a game with impossible rules and unimaginable stakes. I looked at my watch. It was just after 3 p.m. Sunset would be around 7:30. I had roughly 4 hours. 4 hours to find 4 ghosts in a forest that felt like it was actively working against me. Panic was a useless emotion. I forced it down, replacing it with the cold, methodical logic of a professional. This was a search. An unconventional one, but a search nonetheless. I needed a strategy. They were children. They would hide in places children would find appealing or safe. Or at least the memory of them would. I started with the most obvious place. You're not supposed to touch the pictures, the voice had said. The shrine. They were tied to that place. I made my way back to the gorge, my senses on high alert. The forest felt different again. The air of anticipation was gone, replaced by a feeling of playful malice. I felt like I was being watched, not by a predator, but by a group of cruel children peering from behind their hands, stifling giggles. I reached the gorge and carefully made my way back down to the hidden alcove. The shrine was as I had left it. The drawings, the cairns, the pathetic toys. But something was new. Lying on top of the one-eyed teddy bear was a single vibrant, red maple leaf. In this forest of evergreens and pale birches, a red maple leaf was as out of place as a stop sign. It was a clue. A marker. Okay, I said aloud, my voice a defiant challenge to the silence. I see you. You want me to play. I looked around the small damp space. Where would a child hide here? Behind the rocks? Too obvious. In the midst of the falls? Impossible. Then I looked at the cairns. There were 5 of them, small stacks of 3 or 4 stones each. But one of them was different. It was slightly taller, and the top stone was a different color, a dark, almost black river stone, while the others were all gray. I approached it slowly. As I got closer, I heard a faint sound over the roar of the falls. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, 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 tap. It was coming from the black stone. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the stone. It was cold, but it vibrated with a faint energy. I found you, I whispered. The tapping stopped. And from the rock, the first boy's voice echoed in my mind, clear as a bell. 1 down. Good job, Seeker. But the sun is getting lower. The black stone on top of the cairn seemed to lose its dark color, fading to the same unremarkable gray as the others. The first ghost was found. The pressure in my chest eased slightly. This was possible. It was a twisted, terrifying scavenger hunt, but it had rules. It had clues. I could do this. I climbed back out of the gorge, my mind racing. Where next? They were tied to childhood, to games. I thought back to the trail in. I remembered a place I had passed, a massive hollowed-out log that looked like a natural tunnel. A perfect hiding spot for a child. It took me nearly an hour to backtrack and find the log. As I approached it, I could hear the faint, sing-song rhyme again. Dot ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The second girl was inside the log. I didn't see her. But as I peered into the dark, hollow space, I saw 2 small, muddy handprints appear on the inside wall of the log, as if a child had just pressed their hands there. I found you, I said, my voice steadier now. The handprints faded away. The sing-song rhyme stopped. You're getting warmer, the girl's voice whispered in my mind, followed by a faint, mocking giggle. 2 down. 2 to go. I checked my watch. 5:47 p.m. The light in the forest was failing fast, turning from green gold to a deep, bruised orange. The shadows were stretching, becoming things in their own right. I needed to think. Where else? What other clues had I missed? I thought about my dream. The old schoolhouse. It was just a dream. A figment of my subconscious trying to make sense of the story. But in this place, the line between dream and reality felt thin, permeable. The old maps I had studied for this assignment. I remembered seeing a notation on one of them in a section of the park that had been logged in the early 20th century. A small square marked settlement. The settlement had been abandoned in the 1930s after the logging company went bust. Was it possible? It was a long shot miles from my current position. I would have to move fast. I began to jog, pushing my tired body, my eyes scanning the trees for the old, faded blazes of a trail that hadn't been used in almost a century. As I ran, the forest fought me. A sudden thick fog rolled in, reducing visibility to a few feet. A wind, the first I'd felt all day, picked up, howling through the trees, carrying with it the sound of 100 whispering, laughing children. It was trying to disorient me, to make me lose my way, to run out the clock. "I'm not stopping," I yelled into the wind. "You can't stop me." I found the ruins of the settlement just as the last rays of sunlight were dying on the horizon. There wasn't much left. A few crumbling stone foundations, a rusted iron stove, and the skeletal remains of what might have been a small schoolhouse or church. I searched the ruins frantically. Nothing. I was wrong. I had wasted my time. I had lost the game. I sank to my knees in the middle of the largest foundation, defeated. The sun was gone. The forest was a black, impenetrable wall around me. The game was over. And then I heard it. The gentle, rhythmic creak, creak, creak of a swing set. I stood up slowly and turned. Tucked behind the main foundation, almost completely consumed by overgrown bushes, was a single rusted A-frame swing set. One swing was missing. The other was moving, swaying back and forth in the windless air. And sitting on the swing, her small form barely visible in the deep twilight, was the second little girl. "I found you," I breathed, the words a prayer of relief. She stopped swinging. She turned her head, and for the first time I saw her face. It was a pale, sad, translucent oval, her features indistinct, but her eyes were too dark, empty pools of sorrow. "You're almost out of time," she whispered in my mind. "He's the hardest to find. He doesn't want to be found. He's afraid of the dark." And then she and the swing set faded into the encroaching night. 3 down. 1 to go. But it was dark. The game was supposed to be over at sunset. Was this a trick? Or was it an extension? A final, desperate chance? "He's afraid of the dark." The girl's words echoed in my mind. Where would a child who was afraid of the dark hide? He wouldn't hide in a cave or a hollow log. He would hide somewhere with light. Light. There was no light in this forest. Except, I thought back to my campsite. The fire. The first night, when the laughter had been distant, playful. I had built a fire, a beacon of warmth and light in the darkness. It was a mad dash back through the pitch-black woods. I used my flashlight, its beam seeming pathetically weak against the immense darkness. The whispers and laughter returned, closer now, more menacing. They were hurting me, taunting me, their unseen presence a constant pressure at my back. I finally stumbled back into the clearing where I had first made camp. It was as I had left it. The fire pit was cold, filled with gray ash. I had failed. He wasn't here. I dropped to my knees, utterly defeated. I had lost. And now I would stay. I would become a part of their game forever. I closed my eyes, waiting. And then I felt it. A faint warmth. I opened my eyes. I looked at the fire pit. A single tiny ember, buried deep under the ash, was glowing with a soft red light. "He's afraid of the dark." He would hide near the only source of light and warmth he could find. I reached into the cold ash, my fingers searching. I touched something small, hard, and smooth. I pulled it out. It was a small carved wooden bird. The moment my fingers closed around it, a wave of warmth spread through me. The whispers stopped. The laughter ceased. The oppressive presence in the forest lifted. A single final voice, the last boy's, whispered in my mind. It was not mocking. It was not cruel. It was just tired. "You found us," it said. "You won. The path is open." And then, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the forest was just a forest again. I could hear the crickets. I could hear the wind. I could hear the distant, steady, and now blessedly normal roar of whispering falls. The thing outside our tent wore Maya's voice like a perfectly tailored suit. It was a flawless imitation, the same soft cadence, the same slight hint of an Eastern accent, the same gentle pleading she might use if she were genuinely lost and afraid. But the real Maya was beside me, her body rigid with terror, her eyes screaming a silent message: don't answer. Don't believe it. We sat there frozen in the cold, thin air of the tent, two scientists trapped in a problem that had no logical solution. The only thing separating us from that mimic was a thin sheet of nylon. Elias! The voice outside whispered again, closer now, right against the tent wall. I'm scared. I can hear something in the woods. Please just open the tent. Every instinct of compassion, every fiber of my being trained to assist a partner in distress, screamed at me to unzip the door. But my eyes were locked on the real Maya, on the genuine terror in her face. This was the diner's true weapon. It didn't attack with claws or teeth. It attacked with empathy. It turned your own decency into a weapon against you. I did the only thing I could think of. I reached into my pack, pulled out the satellite uplink, and switched it on. The device whirred to life, its small status lights blinking green in the darkness. It was a desperate move. We were supposed to use it only for data transmission, but it was our only link to the outside world. The moment the uplink activated, the whispering outside stopped. A profound silence fell over the campsite again. What are you doing? The real Maya hissed, her voice a terrified whisper. Creating a different kind of noise, I whispered back. Something it doesn't understand. Something that isn't human. I typed a frantic, pre-canned message into the system. Emergency. Sector 9. Immediate extraction required. Hostile anomaly encountered. Vance and Reed. I hit send. The uplink whirred, searching for a satellite. The transmitting light blinked. And then from outside came a new sound. It was not a voice. It was a high-pitched electronic screech, a sound of pure static and rage. It sounded like a dial-up modem screaming in agony. It was the sound of our technology being interfered with, being hated. The screeching grew louder, more intense, seeming to come from all directions at once. It was a physical assault of noise. We clamped our hands over our ears. The very air in the tent vibrated. The trees outside groaned under the sonic pressure. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The uplink's transmit light went from blinking green to solid red. Transmission failed, the screen read. The message hadn't gone through. And we had just made it angry. A slow, deliberate, dragging sound began to circle our tent. Scrape. Drag. Scrape. It was the sound of something heavy and unnatural moving over the forest floor. It wasn't walking. It was pulling itself along. We have to get out of here, I said, my voice grim. We can't stay here. It knows where we are. Go where? Maya cried, her voice on the verge of breaking. It's everywhere. No, I said, my mind racing back to the diner, to the impossible warmth, to the power source contained within its walls. It's not everywhere. It has a heart. It has a source. And we're going back there. Are you insane? She hissed. It will kill us. It will kill us if we stay out here, I countered. Out here we are in its world. But in there in the diner that's its body. If you want to kill a predator, you don't fight its shadow. You go for the heart. It was a desperate, half-baked theory. But it was better than sitting here and waiting to be torn apart by a monster that sounded like my partner. We didn't have a choice. We grabbed our packs, took a deep breath, and in one coordinated movement, I ripped open the tent flap while Maya shone her most powerful flashlight into the clearing. There was nothing there. The campsite was empty. The dragging sound had stopped. But the air was thick with the palpable menace. We didn't run. We moved with a low controlled speed, back through the forest, back towards the impossible clearing. We moved like soldiers, back to back, our flashlight beams cutting frantic, nervous arcs through the oppressive darkness. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a footstep. The music started when we were about a quarter-mile from the diner. It wasn't a gentle melody this time. It was a distorted, warped version of Patty Page's "How Much Is That Doggy in the Window?" The voice was pitched down, slow and slurring, like a record player dying. The cheerful tune had been twisted into a funeral dirge. The forest was singing us a song of dread. When we reached the clearing, the diner was different. The warm, welcoming yellow light was gone. It was now bathed in the stark, angry red glow of its neon sign. The sign, which had read "The Starlight Diner," now had letters missing. The S, the T, and the R were dark. It now read simply, "Light Diner." A chilling accidental truth. Light as in not heavy, or light as in a thing to be consumed. The front door was wide open, a black, gaping maw inviting us in. The inside was no longer pristine. The tables were overturned. The milkshake glasses were shattered on the floor. The half-eaten pie was gone. It looked like a storm had ripped through it. Our presence, our technology, our refusal had desecrated this place. And at the far end of the room, sitting in one of the booths, was a figure. It was a man, dressed in the crisp, white uniform of a 1950s soda jerk, complete with a paper hat. His back was to us. He was perfectly still. "Hello," I called out, my voice weak. The figure did not turn. But a voice filled the room, coming from the jukebox, from the griddle, from the very walls. It was a calm, smooth baritone voice, the kind you'd hear from a late-night radio DJ. "Welcome back, kids," the voice said. "We were so sad you left. The coffee's getting cold." "What are you?" Maya demanded, her voice shaking but defiant. The figure in the booth slowly began to turn. It moved with a smooth, unnatural grace. "We are the place," the voice crooned. "We are the memory. We are the warmth on a cold night. We are the feeling of home you've been missing your whole life. We are the cure for loneliness." The figure was facing us now. It had the clean-cut, handsome face of a 1950s movie star. But its eyes were two perfect, black circles. Empty voids that seemed to drink the light from the room. And its smile was too wide, too fixed, filled with too many teeth. "You came back because you were hungry," the soda jerk said, its mouth not moving. "You missed the feeling. We can give it to you. We can give you any memory you want. Your first love. Christmas morning, 1998. The day you got your dog. We have it all on the menu. All you have to do is sit down. And stay." It gestured to the booth opposite it. The table was set for two. On it were two steaming plates of bacon and eggs and two full mugs of coffee. The smell was intoxicating, designed to trigger the most basic, primal feelings of comfort and safety. I could see Maya wavering. I could feel the pull of it myself. The thought of just sitting down, of letting go, of living in a perfect, warm memory instead of the cold, terrifying present. That's when I remembered the menu. Payment is rendered upon completion of the meal. We accept memories as currency. "It's a lie, Maya," I said, my voice a low growl. "It doesn't give you the memory. It eats it. It eats everything you are and leaves an empty shell." The soda jerk's smile widened. "The shell is warm," the voice purred. "The shell is happy. The shell does not feel pain. Isn't that what you all want?" It stood up slowly. It was taller than a normal man. Its limbs seemed to stretch, to elongate as it rose. The pristine white uniform began to shimmer. The fabric seemed to resolve and dissolve like TV static. "You broke the rules," it said, its voice losing its smooth charm, replaced by that high-pitched, electronic screech of static. "You brought your noise into our quiet. You refused the gift. And now you have to be integrated. You have to be added to the collection." The lights in the diner began to flicker violently, from red to white to black. In the strobing flashes, the soda jerk's form was no longer stable. One second it was a man. The next it was a tall, shadowy figure with limbs that bent at the wrong angles. The next it was a swirling vortex of faces, the old woman from the woods, the faceless farmer, the child with the red boutal screaming silently. This was its true form. A collector. A parasite that wore nostalgia as its skin. I grabbed the heavy industrial fire extinguisher from the wall next to the door. Maya, the kitchen. Find the power source. The thing on the wall. She didn't need to be told twice. She bolted for the swinging doors. The creature, the anomaly, turned its shifting, chaotic form towards me. It let out that shriek of static again, and the remaining glass in the diner shattered, exploding inwards. I aimed the extinguisher and pulled the pin. A thick white cloud of CO2 blasted into the center of the room, engulfing the creature. It recoiled, its form solidifying for a moment into the soda jerk again. Its face contorted in a silent snarl of pain and anger. The cold. It hated the cold. Elias. Maya's voice screamed from the kitchen. I found it. It's not a generator. I don't know what it is. I sprayed the creature again, forcing it back, and ran for the kitchen. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. In the center of the kitchen, where the griddle should have been, the floor was gone. In its place was a gaping circular hole, descending into a darkness that seemed to swallow the light. And from this hole, a single thick, pulsating, organic-looking cable snaked up and plugged into the wall, feeding the entire diner. The cable was a deep, sickly purple, and it seemed to be breathing. It was the diner's umbilical cord, connecting it to whatever lay beneath. And standing next to it, her hand hovering over a large red emergency shutoff lever on the wall, was Maya. The creature shrieked from the main room and began to reform, its shadowy limbs stretching towards us. Do it! I screamed. Maya grabbed the lever with both hands and pulled. The sound that erupted was not from this world. It was a psychic scream that tore through my mind, a sound of profound loss and violation. The lights in the diner went out for the last time, plunging us into absolute darkness. The impossible warmth vanished instantly, replaced by a deep, tomb-like cold. The smell of bacon and coffee was replaced by the smell of ancient, damp earth and ozone. And the cable, the diner's heart, began to retract, pulling itself back down into the chasm in the floor with a wet, sickening, tearing sound. We didn't wait to see the end of it. We ran. We scrambled out of the dead kitchen, through the now dark and silent dining room, and out the front door. We didn't stop running until our lungs burned and our legs gave out. When we finally collapsed, miles away, and looked back, there was nothing to see. No red glow. No clearing. Just the endless, dark, and silent forest. As if the diner had never been there at all. The extraction team found us at dawn. Our emergency beacon had never been sent, but our lack of a check-in had triggered a search. We were hypothermic, dehydrated, and suffering from what the official report called acute psychological distress. We told them what we saw. We showed them the menu I still had clutched in my hand. They took it, classifying it as anomalous evidence. We were debriefed for weeks. They showed us satellite imagery of the area. On the grid where we swore the diner had been, there was nothing. Just a small, unassuming geological depression. A scar. They told us we had suffered a shared hallucination, a folie à deux, brought on by isolation and stress. They reassigned us to desk duty away from the field, away from the wilderness. But I know what we saw. And I know what we did. We found a place that feeds on the past. A place that offers you a warm cup of coffee in exchange for your soul. And we unplugged it. I don't know what the diner was. A creature? A ship? A different kind of life? I don't know. But sometimes late at night, when I'm alone and the house is quiet, I can still faintly smell it. The smell of hot coffee and frying bacon. And I can hear that music. And I know with a certainty that chills me to my core that it's still out there in the dark, unmapped places of the world. Waiting for another lost traveler to stumble into its warm, welcoming light, hungry for a taste of a time that never was. Thank you for completing this case file from the Wilderness Protocol. There are places in this world that are not on any map. They exist in the spaces between, in the quiet moments of longing, in the universal human desire to go back home again. Be careful what you are nostalgic for. The past can be a hungry place. If this report has served its purpose, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. The more who are aware of the protocol, the safer the boundaries become. Until the next time, if you find yourself lost in the woods and stumble upon a place that feels too good to be true, it is. Turn around.